My name is Lorraine Dupree Holt. I am 51 years old, and I live in Nashville, Tennessee, where I was born, and where I have spent the last 3 years putting my life back together, with the particular determination of a woman who was told, on more than one occasion, that she did not have the fight left in her. I was married to Darnell Holt for 19 years. We have 2 children, a daughter named Simone, who is 23 and works in healthcare administration in Atlanta, and a son named Deshaun, who is 19 and finishing his 2nd year at Tennessee State. I love them completely, and I will not tell you more about them than that, because they are not part of this story in any way that belongs to anyone but them. Darnell is 54. He owns a landscaping company in the metro Nashville area. He is charming at a barbecue and precise about what he wants, and slow to give you what he has agreed to give. The case file on my attorney's table was 16 months of what that slowness cost him. If you are watching from Nashville, Knoxville, Memphis, or anywhere in the South where the divorce took longer than the marriage deserved, drop your city in the comments. I want to know you are out here. And if you have ever been in a room where someone assumed you were finished, subscribe. Because what I am about to tell you is for every woman who has shown up to her own so-called ending and refused to be buried. Before I tell you what the judge said, before I tell you what was in that 16-month file, and what Darnell's face looked like when he finally understood that the woman he brought flowers to bury was the plaintiff in the room, I need to take you back. Not to the courtroom. To the night 3 years ago when Darnell told me the marriage was over. And what he did not know I had already started doing, because the hearing was not where this was won. It was won long before that room. Darnell Holt proposed to me in 1998 on a Thursday night, in a Cracker Barrel parking lot in Cookeville, Tennessee, which is not as romantic as it sounds, and also exactly as romantic as it sounds. Depending on what you are 28, and what you believe about parking lots and Thursday nights, and a man who looks at you like you are the specific answer to a question he has been carrying. I said yes. I married him at 29, and I gave the next 19 years to a life that was, for most of it, genuinely good. I want to say that clearly, because stories like this have a way of flattening the years into pure grievance, and that is not the truth. We raised 2 children. We built a house. We had Sundays and anniversaries and an argument about a couch in 2007 that we still called the couch argument in 2022. The good years were real. The last 4 were something else. Darnell started his landscaping company in 2015. It did well. He is talented at what he does. I will always give him that. And by 2018, the company had 12 employees and 3 commercial accounts, and Darnell had become someone who had decided that success was a private achievement. Let me explain what I mean by that. There is a kind of man who builds something and then builds a wall around it. Not to protect what he has, but to protect the version of himself that built it. The version that did not need anyone. The version that arrived at the destination alone. And so he revises the map, slowly and without announcement, until the person who walked with him is no longer on the route. That is what Darnell did. In 2018, he moved the business accounts into a separate bank. He told me it was for tax purposes. I believed him, because I had no reason not to yet. In 2019, he started working Saturdays, then Sunday mornings, then most of Thursday nights, which had been our night, dinner together. The kids at their activities, the one slot in the week we had kept since before the children were born. I said, Darnell, Thursdays. He said, the business is growing, Lorraine. I can't put a schedule on growth. In 2020, I found a receipt. Not in a pocket, I want to be clear, because I know how this sounds, and I am not a woman who searches pockets. It was in the trash can in his truck, visible when I leaned in to retrieve a grocery bag I had left on the seat. A restaurant receipt. A restaurant I had never been to. 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine, and a dessert. Dated a Thursday. I picked it up. I looked at it. I put it in my purse. I did not say anything that night, or the next week. I was not planning. I was not strategizing. I was grieving in the particular private way of a woman who has found proof of something she already knew in a part of herself she had refused to listen to. The receipt was not a surprise. It was a confirmation. And confirmations require a different kind of time than surprises do. In 2021, Darnell told me he wanted a divorce. He told me on a Tuesday. In the kitchen. He was standing at the counter, and I was at the table, and he said it the way you say something you have rehearsed enough that the emotion has been worn smooth. He said, I think we've run our course. I think we both know it. I think it's better for everyone if we're honest about that. I said, are you seeing someone? He said, this isn't about anyone else. I said, Darnell. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, I'll have someone reach out to you about next steps. Not an attorney. Someone, as if the dissolution of 19 years was an administrative task he was delegating. I watched him walk out of the kitchen. I sat at the table for a while. Then I called my friend Cheryl, who had been divorced for 6 years and had told me, at a birthday dinner 2 years earlier, the name of her attorney. I had written it in the back of a planner I still had. Her name was Patricia Odom. I called Patricia Odom's office the next morning. What followed was 16 months. I want to tell you about those 16 months, because they are the whole story. The courtroom was just the room where the story arrived. Darnell had believed, I think, that I would be manageable. That word is important. He had spent 4 years making himself unavailable, and 3 of them making me feel like the marriage's decline was a weather event, rather than a choice. And he had arrived at the kitchen conversation confident that the woman sitting at that table was too tired, and too uncertain, and too dependent on the life they shared to do anything complicated. He was describing someone he had decided I was. He was not describing me. Patricia was thorough. That is the right word. She did not move fast, she moved completely. She subpoenaed the business accounts that had been moved in 2018. She retained a forensic accountant named Dr. Wells, who spent 4 months reconstructing the financial history of Holt Landscaping and Lawn Care, and producing a document that was, Patricia told me, one of the cleaner pictures of deliberate asset concealment she had seen in 20 years of family law. Darnell had been moving money, not dramatically, not in a way that announced itself, slowly, in increments, into a business account in the name of a subsidiary LLC that had been formed in 2019 without my knowledge. The LLC was called DH Property Services. It had no employees and 1 asset, a parcel of land in Williamson County worth approximately $310,000. He had bought land with marital funds in a company name I had never heard of, while telling me the business was growing and that growth didn't have a schedule. Dr. Wells's report was 62 pages. Patricia told me to read all of it. I read it twice. Then, I put it in the case file, and I went home, and I made dinner, and I went to bed, and I lay in the dark, and I thought about the receipt in the truck and the Thursday nights, and the man in the Cracker Barrel parking lot in Cookville, who had looked at me like I was the specific answer to a question he had been carrying. I thought, he found a different answer. I thought, that is his problem now. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday. I noticed, Darnell's attorney, a man named Garland who Patricia described as competent and overconfident, which she said was a useful combination, had filed a response to our asset disclosure motion that characterized D Property Services as a premarital business interest, and the Williamson County land as a business investment unrelated to the marital estate. This was not accurate. Patricia had the incorporation date, the account transfer records, and 62 pages of forensic accounting that said precisely how not accurate it was. But I did not know about the girlfriend until the morning of the hearing. I found out the way you find out most things in a divorce you did not want, through a text from someone who thought you already knew. A mutual acquaintance named Beverly, who is the kind of woman who sends a text that begins with "Are you okay?" and then tells you the thing that should have been in the first sentence. She said, I saw Darnell at a restaurant last week with a woman, and someone at my church told me they're coming to the hearing together. I didn't know if you knew. Are you okay? I read the text in the parking garage of the Brentwood office building, where Patricia's practice was located. I sat with it for a moment. I thought about the gray dress. I didn't know about the gray dress yet. That came later. But I thought about whatever she would be wearing, and about the flowers, and about what it means when a man brings the next chapter to the closing of the last one. What it is designed to communicate. What he wants the room to feel when she walks in with him. He wanted me to see it and fall apart. That was the plan. I texted Beverly back. I'm okay. Thank you for telling me. I'll see you on the other side. Then I went upstairs and sat across from Patricia and told her. Patricia looked at me over the top of her reading glasses in the way she had of conveying complete information in a single expression. She said, Does it change anything for you? I said, No. She said, Good. Because it doesn't change anything for me either. She went back to the file. I straightened my blazer. We drove to the courthouse. I want to tell you about the 16 months, because I have not told you enough of them yet. The first thing Patricia told me when I sat in her office in 2021 was this: do not move money. Do not change accounts. Do not make any financial decisions without calling me first. Document everything you can document, quietly. And do not let Darnell know the shape of what we are building. I did all of those things. I kept a log. Not emotional, factual, dates, amounts, transactions I noticed, screenshots of statements before they changed. A record of every time Darnell referenced the business in conversation and what he said about it. I had been a bookkeeper for a medical practice for 12 years before the children were born. I understood ledgers. I understood what a clean record looks like, and I understood what a record with gaps in it looks like. Darnell's business records had gaps. I documented the gaps. Dr. Wells later told Patricia that my documentation had accelerated his forensic work by approximately 3 months. 3 months of a forensic accountant's time, in family law, is not a small thing. I also did something else during the 16 months that I have not told many people. I went back to work. Not the bookkeeping. I had stepped away from that in 2010 when Deshaun was born, and the practice had long since filled my position. I went back in a different way. I enrolled in a certification program for estate and financial planning. I attended evening classes at a community college in Brentwood. I studied on weekends. Darnell was not home on weekends, which made the study easier. I finished in 14 months. Not because I needed it for the case. Because I needed it for afterward. Because I had spent 3 years watching my financial life be managed by a man who had decided I did not need to understand it, and I had decided. Sitting at that kitchen table on the Tuesday, he told me our course had run, that I would never again be in a room where money was the language, and I did not speak it. Patricia knew about the certification. She did not put it in the case file. She put it in her notes under a section she called context, which is what good attorneys do with the things that tell them who they are actually working with. The night before the hearing, I sat at my kitchen table, the same table from the Tuesday, and I went through the case file one more time. The forensic report, the bank records, the incorporation documents for DH Property Services, the Williamson County land parcel, the transfer records, the photographs Patricia's investigator had produced, which I will not describe in detail because they are not the point of this story, though they were very much a point of the filing. I closed the file. I laid out the burgundy blazer. I went to sleep earlier than I expected to. I want to tell you something about that sleep. It was the best sleep I had gotten in 3 years. Not because I was certain about the outcome, I was not, and Patricia had told me plainly that certainty in a courtroom is a thing you pursue, not a thing you bank on. I slept because I was prepared. Because I had done the thing that preparation does. It converts the fear of the unknown into the manageable weight of the known. I knew what was in that file. I knew what Patricia was going to say. I knew what Dr. Wells's testimony would establish. And I knew that whatever Darnell had planned to walk into that room with, he had not planned to walk into a room with me. I was already seated when they arrived. Patricia and I had come early. This was intentional. We wanted to be established in the room before anyone else. Files open. Water poured. The particular stillness of a table that has been prepared. I heard them before I saw them. The gallery doors, and then footsteps, and then a particular quality of silence in the room that happens when people notice something unexpected. I did not turn around. I heard Darnell's voice, low, controlled, and then the soft sound of people finding seats. I heard the flowers. I know that sounds strange, but there is a sound to someone setting a flower arrangement on a wooden pew, a papery whisper, and I heard it. Patricia, who was reviewing a document and did not look up, said quietly, "Don't turn around." I said, "I wasn't going to." She said, "I know." I said it anyway. Darnell's attorney Garland came to the front, and they exchanged the professional courtesies attorneys exchange. Patricia was pleasant. Garland was confident. He had not seen Dr. Wells's updated report, which Patricia had filed at 4:47 p.m. the previous day, the last permissible filing window before the hearing. This was intentional. The judge entered. The Honorable Sandra Merritt, Chancery Court, Davidson County, 61 years old, 22 years on the bench. The kind of judge who reads every filing and does not require theater to find its meaning. She looked at the plaintiff's table. She looked at me. I do not know what she saw. But I know what I was. A woman in a burgundy blazer, with a 16-month case file, and her hands flat and still on the table, and her face arranged into the composure of someone who has done the work and is ready for the room. Garland opened. He characterized DH Property Services as a pre-marital enterprise. He characterized the Williamson County land as a business asset outside the marital estate. He was smooth. He was prepared. He had done his homework on the wrong exam. Patricia stood. She said, "Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to introduce Exhibit 14, the forensic accounting report, prepared by Dr. Marcus Wells, which establishes the date of incorporation for Ditch Property Services, March 14, 2019, and the source of the initial capitalization, a transfer of $87,000 from the joint Holt household operating account on March 11, 2019, 3 days before incorporation. She paused. She said, "The plaintiff would also like to draw the court's attention to Exhibits 15 through 23, which document 12 additional transfers from marital accounts to Ditch Property Services between 2019 and 2021, totaling $214,000. And to Exhibit 24, the Harris County land parcel deed, purchased through DH Property Services in February 2021 for $310,000. The room was quiet. Garland shifted in his chair. Judge Merritt was reading. She read for a long time, the kind of reading that has a shape to it, not scanning, not reviewing. Actually reading. Absorbing. Then she looked up. She looked at Garland. She said, "Counsel, I'm going to need a recess for your client to reconsider the characterization of DH Property Services in light of this documentation. I'd suggest using it productively." That was the moment. Not because of what the judge said, though what she said was significant. Because of what happened in the gallery when she said it. I heard, behind me, the sound of someone standing up quickly. The sound of someone leaning toward someone else and speaking in a low, urgent voice. The sound of flowers being gathered. They left during the recess. Darnell did not look at me on his way out. He looked at the floor, and then he looked at the door, and then he and the woman in the gray dress walked out of the room he had come into believing was a closing ceremony. I looked straight ahead. Patricia refilled my water glass. She said, "How are you doing?" I said, "I'm good." She said, "You are." The recess lasted 40 minutes. When court reconvened, Garland withdrew the characterization of DH Property Services as a premarital entity. The asset was entered into the marital estate calculation. The Williamson County land was valued and included. The settlement that followed over the next 6 weeks reflected the complete picture of what had been built during the marriage and what had been moved. Simone called me that evening. She said, "Mama, how did it go?" I said, "It went." She said, "Did you win?" I thought about that word. Win. I turned it over the way you turn a word over when it doesn't quite fit the shape of what happened. I said, "I showed up prepared." And the room reflected that back. She said, "That's winning, Mama." Maybe she is right. Maybe winning is just the name we give to the outcome when preparation meets a room that is finally ready to hear it. I want to tell you something about the woman in the gray dress. I do not blame her. I want to say that clearly, because she is not the villain of this story, and she was not the point of it. She walked into a room carrying flowers for someone's ending, because a man told her it was an ending. She did not know I was sitting at the plaintiff's table. She did not know about Dr. Wells, or the forensic report, or the 16 months. She did not know anything, except what Darnell had chosen to tell her. And what Darnell had chosen to tell her was a version of me that he had decided was true. I think about that sometimes. The version of you that exists in other people's minds when they have decided what you are. The version that is too tired, too dependent, too finished. The version a man describes to a woman he is bringing to a courtroom because he believes the description is accurate enough to bet on. He was wrong. And I will tell you this. The preparation is the point. Not the courtroom, the 16 months before it. The log I kept. The certification I earned. The file I built. The sleep I got the night before because I had done the work and the work was done. Darnell thought the marriage was what I had. He did not understand that I was what I had. I am still in Nashville. I am in a house that is mine on paper, in a way that matters. I have a certification on my wall and a practice I am building, and Sundays that belong to no one's schedule but my own. I am not finished. I have never been finished. I want to hear from you tonight. Have you ever walked into a room where someone had already written your ending? Have you ever shown up prepared for a moment that someone else thought you wouldn't survive?